The year was 1883, and the autumn winds carried the scent of pine and distant rain through the small coal-streaked town of Haversfield, Pennsylvania. Nestled between the mines and the mountain shadows, 22-year-old Clara Whitmore folded her last piece of scrap fabric into a worn satchel. Her hands were raw from sewing and scrubbing for the wealthy families on the hill. But her eyes still held something precious. Hope Clara had never expected much from life. Her parents had died during a typhoid outbreak when she was only 12, and the orphanage taught her to be quiet, obedient, and invisible. She'd aged out at 16 and spent the next 6 years trading labor for shelter. Often ignored, sometimes mistreated, and always alone. Yet one moment had changed everything. A newspaper clipping left behind by a traveling merchant. Western Heart's matrimonial agency, helping gentlewomen find honest husbands in the West. She had read it over and over, her fingers tracing the ink like scripture. The agency promised matches with men who valued loyalty, work ethic, and kindness over wealth and breeding. Clara had none of the former but hoped she had enough of the latter. It took her a month to afford postage, another week to buy clean paper and ink. She wrote her letter by candlelight, her words trembling but true. My name is Clara Whitmore. I have no family, no dowry, and no property. But I know how to run a household, tend a garden, and sew near anything. I work hard, I keep quiet, and I long for a place to belong. I seek not riches, only someone who might look at me like I matter. She sent the letter and waited. And waited. 4 weeks passed before the reply came, but it wasn't what she'd hoped. The letter from the matrimonial agency was curt and formal. Miss Whitmore, we regret to inform you that your profile has not met the interest of our clients at this time. Many of our applicants seek brides with more substantial means, experience in frontier life, or family connections. Clara read it 3 times. Her heart sank with each word. Too poor. Not enough. Not even wanted by men who had no wives, in places where women were scarce. She sat on the edge of her narrow cot, staring out the small window toward the railway line. That letter should have broken her, but instead, something inside her stiffened, like the spine of a worn book determined to be read one more time. What Clara didn't know. What she couldn't know was that her letter had been seen by one man. A man who didn't care for embroidered linens or pedigree. A man who had stared at her handwriting and thought, she sounds like she knows loneliness too. His name was Elijah Callahan, a reclusive rancher from the Colorado Territory, nearly 10 years her senior and long hardened by life on the range. He had lost his wife 3 winters prior, and since then, his days had stretched long and silent, broken only by the rustle of cattle and the occasional howl of coyotes. When Elijah had written to the agency, he'd asked for someone real. Not soft, he wrote, but steady. Not polished, but good. They'd sent him a selection of perfumed letters and portraits of stiff-necked women in silk. But Clara's letter had been tucked underneath the others, nearly overlooked. No picture, just honesty. He'd read it once, then again, and again. He knew the agency had rejected her. He didn't care. The very next morning, Elijah saddled his bay mare and rode 30 miles to the nearest telegraph office. The message he sent was short but urgent. Find Clara Whitmore. I want her hand, we'll pay her fare. I'll be waiting. Far away in Pennsylvania, Clara tried to forget the letter. She went back to cleaning houses and watching trains come and go, imagining the lives of people who were going somewhere anywhere. Her days were long, her nights longer. But all of that would change with one knock on the boarding house door. A telegram, sealed and stamped with the Western Heart's insignia, addressed to Miss Clara Whitmore, and for the first time in years, her heart beat with something fragile and rare. Possibility. The telegram lay in Clara's lap like a fragile promise. She read it once, twice. Her fingers trembled as she touched the inked words again, her eyes wide and unbelieving. Clara Whitmore, stop Colorado rancher Elijah Callahan requests courtship. Stop fare prepaid, stop departure arranged next Friday, stop respond immediate, stop. She had been rejected, passed over, told she was too poor, and now this suddenly, someone wanted her. Not for her dowry or family name, but for her truth. A man named Elijah Callahan, who saw her letter and answered with action. Clara sat in stunned silence. All her life she'd been dismissed, pushed to the corners of rooms and decisions, but here was a door open and wide, and all she had to do was walk through. She went to the boarding house matron the next morning and gave notice. Mrs. Finch, a square-jawed woman with wiry gray hair and an even warier temper, looked at Clara, over her spectacles. Colorado, she repeated, folding her arms. You don't even know the man. Clara straightened her spine. I didn't know my employers, either. They didn't care to know me. This man, he saw something in me no one else has. Mrs. Finch's lips pressed into a tight line. After a long silence, she gave a single nod. Then go, child. But don't let that backbone of yours grow soft. You'll need it. The train whistled. Through the station, 3 days later, its black steam coiling into the sky like a serpent. Clara stood on the platform in a borrowed coat, her small carpet bag clasped in both hands. Inside it were all her belongings: 2 dresses, a pair of gloves, her sewing kit, and the letter from the agency. The ticket agent called her name, and she stepped onto the train, her heart pounding with each step. The journey west was long and unkind. The towns grew smaller, the land flatter, then finally rolled into endless golden hills. She watched rivers cut through valleys like scars and stared at mountains that looked like old gods sleeping. Each stop brought dust, unfamiliar voices, and wide, uncertain skies. But inside, Clara was steady. Something had awakened in her on that platform back in Haversfield. Not just the hope of marriage, but a belief that maybe, just maybe, she was meant for more than servitude. She imagined Elijah Callahan over his handwriting, his reasons. Was he kind? Was he lonely, like her? What did he see in her words that others had missed? She knew she might arrive to find disappointment, awkwardness, even regret, but she also knew the risk was better than the silence she'd left behind. Elijah stood by the train depot in Dust Creek, Colorado, a wide-brimmed hat shading his brow and a sprig of sage in his vest pocket. He hadn't shaved, wasn't sure she'd mind, but he had cleaned his boots and worn the shirt his late wife once stitched. It felt strange, waiting for someone he'd never met. But something in Clara's letter had struck deep. He remembered how she wrote, I long for a place to belong. He understood that ache too well. The train screeched into the station late in the afternoon. Steam burst from its iron frame, and passengers poured out in scattered clusters. And then he saw her. She was smaller than he imagined, with auburn hair pinned neatly and tired eyes that scanned the crowd with anxious hope. When their eyes met, she froze. He gave a single nod, removed his hat, and stepped forward. Miss Whitmore. His voice was quiet but sure. Clara swallowed. Mr. Callahan. Yes, ma'am. Neither moved for a moment. Then he extended his hand, not like a transaction, but like an offering. She took it. It was rough and warm, like sun-baked earth. Steady. That night, Clara sat on the porch of Elijah's ranch house, a modest place nestled against hills and cottonwoods. The evening air was sharp with pine and promise. He'd made her tea, and they'd spoken little, both adjusting to the strangeness of not being alone anymore. I hope it's not too far from what you imagined, he said finally, watching the sky turn rose-colored. I didn't imagine much, she admitted, but I think that's a good thing. Leaves room for what's real. He smiled at that. She didn't know yet if this was love, but it was the first time in her life she'd felt chosen, not because of what she had, but because of who she was. And that was a beginning. The ranch was quiet at dawn. No voices, no clatter. Only the sound of birds in the cottonwoods and the occasional snort of a restless horse. Clara stood in the kitchen, apron tied over her traveling dress, carefully kneading bread dough in a ceramic bowl. She'd always baked for others, never in her own kitchen. Now, this space smelled of yeast and wood smoke, and it belonged at least in part to her. She hadn't yet called it home. That word still felt too large. But the quiet no longer felt empty. Elijah had risen with the sun and left to tend the east pasture. He said little that morning, but the way his eyes met hers at breakfast, soft, unsure, respectful, stayed with her long after he rode off. They were strangers, in truth, bound by a letter and a gesture, but still uncertain of how to step into the space between them. By noon, Clara ventured outside. The air smelled like sweet hay and leather, and the land stretched in golden waves around the small ranch house. Horses grazed in the distance, and a windmill creaked somewhere behind the barn. She found a stool near the chicken coop and sat with a small basket of feed. The hens clucked around her as she scattered it, one pecking at her shoe. She laughed softly, something she hadn't done in months, years, maybe. Behind her, a voice broke the stillness. You take 2 hens quick, Elijah said, walking up with a coiled rope in one hand. Clara stood, brushing her skirt. I used to feed them at the orphanage. They didn't like me then, either. He smiled faintly, then paused. They'll come around. Hens are wary creatures. Like people, They stood in the sun, quiet again. But it wasn't an awkward silence, just the kind that fills when two people are learning how to be near. "I don't expect you to jump right into ranch life," he added, almost apologetically. "You came a long way, and I imagine it's not what you're used to." She looked out at the fields, the fence lines, the hills that held the wind like a cradle. "No," she said honestly. "But I don't miss what I left behind." That made him look at her differently, like he saw a scar beneath her words, and respected it. In the evenings, they shared supper at the small kitchen table. Elijah insisted she not cook every night. He made a decent stew and better coffee. They talked more now. About the weather, the livestock, his late wife Miriam, who'd passed from fever 3 winters before. She was quiet, he said one night, staring into his cup. "Gentle, like snow that don't make a sound when it falls. I thought I'd die with her." Clara listened, folding her hands in her lap. "You don't have to pretend she didn't exist," she told him. "That's not what I came here for." He met her gaze, the weight in his eyes, deep and still. "I know," he said softly. "That's why I wanted you." As the days passed, Clara settled into rhythm. She mended shirts, chopped vegetables, fed the animals, and even helped Elijah patch a section of fencing after a storm. He taught her to ride a horse not well. At first, she laughed the first time she slipped sideways and landed in the tall grass. He laughed too, a sound that surprised both of them. He offered his hand, but not before teasing. "Reckon the hen took to you faster." They were beginning to understand each other. She saw that he wasn't cold, just cautious. He saw she wasn't fragile, only worn. Their scars didn't frighten each other. They recognized them, and in that recognition, a quiet trust bloomed. One night, as they sat beneath the stars, her on the porch swing, him leaning against the rail, he asked her the question they'd both avoided. "Did you come because you were desperate? Or because you wanted something different?" Clara didn't hesitate. "Both," she said. "I wanted to be needed. Not used, not pitied, just needed." Elijah nodded slowly. "I reckon I needed someone too, but I was afraid it'd be the wrong kind. And now," he looked at her, "now I'm afraid it might be the right one, and I don't want to mess it up." She smiled gently, heartful. "We're both learning," she said. "Let's take our time." Their fingers brushed that night just for a moment on the porch rail. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was real. A seed, planted in the soil, of understanding. And both of them slowly, cautiously, began to hope it might grow. The early weeks at the ranch passed in a mix of hard work and quiet companionship, but the West had its own challenges, and neither Clara nor Elijah could escape them. Just as Clara started to feel the land beneath her feet, the first test arrived, one that would shake them both. It was early October when the cattle began acting restless. Elijah noticed it first during his morning rounds. The herd shifted uneasily near a ridge, their heads raised, ears flicking. He narrowed his eyes, feeling the sharp pulse of something unseen. "We've got a storm coming," Elijah told Clara. Later that day, a bad one. The sky had already turned slate gray by sundown, and the wind whipped through the cottonwoods with a haunting keening. Clara hurried to secure windows and tend to the animals. Her hands, once soft from city life, moved sure and steady, but the storm was more than weather. It was a reminder that life here was raw and unforgiving. That night, the rain hammered the roof like stones, and the wind threatened to rip the house from its foundations. Elijah paced the porch, shouting reassurances to his cattle over the roar, while Clara sat inside, clutching the quilt she'd brought from Pennsylvania. Morning brought damage. A fallen tree blocked the creek's path, creating a flood that threatened the pasture. The fence was torn, and several calves had gone missing. Elijah was grim, but thankful they had survived. He and Clara spent the day repairing fences, searching the woods, and calming the restless animals. "You're tougher than you look," Elijah said with a tired smile as Clara pulled a splinter from her hand. She smiled back, knowing this wasn't just about physical strength, it was about spirit. But the true challenge came not from nature, but from neighbors. Word had spread in Dust Creek that the rancher had brought a mail-order bride. Gossip circled like crows. Cruel. Some curious few men openly questioned why Elijah would settle for a woman with no money, no land, no status. One afternoon, a local rancher named Jed approached Elijah in the saloon, a smirk twisting his weathered face. "Callahan," he said loudly, "heard you took on a charity case from the East. What's the matter? No one in Colorado could handle you." Elijah's jaw tightened, but he answered quietly, "She's no charity. And I don't need your approval. Jet's eyes narrowed. We'll see how long she lasts out here. Clara heard about the confrontation later that night. The words stung more than the wind or the rain. For the first time since arriving, she doubted herself. Was she really cut out for this life? Would Elijah regret his choice? Elijah found her on the porch, staring into the dark. Don't listen to them, he said firmly, stepping beside her. You belong here, I chose you. Tears pricked her eyes. I want to be strong for you, but it's hard. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders. We'll be strong together. That night, they made a pact to face the land, the weather, and the whispers as one. The frontier was harsh, but so was their resolve. Together, Clara and Elijah would carve out a life not perfect, not easy but real. Because sometimes, love was less about fairy tales and more about standing side by side against the storm. The days grew shorter as autumn deepened, and Clara found herself settling into the rhythms of ranch life. Each dawn brought new challenges: chopping wood for the stove, mending fences, feeding chickens and cattle, but also small victories. The land, wild and untamed, was teaching her patience and resilience. Elijah watched her quietly, admiring how she moved with growing confidence, how her laughter began to ring more freely through the open spaces. The woman who had once been deemed too poor was becoming the heart of his world. One crisp morning, Clara rose before the sun and wrapped a shawl around her shoulders. She stepped outside to find Elijah already saddling the horses. You, ready for the fall roundup? He asked, glancing over. She nodded. I'm learning. Elijah smiled and handed her the reins of a sturdy mare named Belle. Let's see what you've got. The roundup was grueling but exhilarating. Clara rode alongside Elijah, her breath visible in the cold air as they guided the cattle toward the corral. She had never been on a horse before the ranch, but she adapted quickly, remembering the encouragement Elijah had given as they worked. Elijah told stories of his late wife and the dreams he'd once had for the ranch. Clara listened, weaving her own hopes into the fabric of his life. For the first time, they were truly partners to souls, entwined by more than necessity. Evenings were spent by the fire, sharing meals made from scratch and talking long into the night. Clara sewed patches onto Elijah's worn shirts, and he whittled small wooden figures that she placed on the mantel. One night, as the stars glittered overhead, Elijah took Clara's hand. You're the strongest woman I know, he said softly. She smiled, warmth flooding her chest. I'm stronger because of you. Together, they began making plans. Clara wanted a garden where they could grow vegetables, fresh herbs and flowers. Elijah dreamed of expanding the ranch, building a bigger barn, and maybe even raising children. Someday their dreams were modest but filled with promise, a future neither had dared to hope for before. The neighbors began to notice the change to Clara's hard work and gentle spirit slowly won respect. And Elijah's protective kindness made it clear she was not a charity case but a true partner. Life on the frontier was still tough, but together they were carving out a place where love, respect, and hope could grow. Despite the growing bond between Clara and Elijah, the past was never far behind. One chilly morning, a stranger rode into Dust Creek, a man with a sharp gaze and a worn leather coat that carried the dust of many miles. Elijah recognized him immediately, a cousin from back east, Samuel Callahan. The family had lost touch over the years, but Samuel's arrival brought more than just memories. He carried news that unsettled the quiet ranch. There's trouble brewing, Samuel warned, over a firelit dinner, a land dispute. Some folks don't want your ranch growing any bigger. Elijah frowned, the lines on his face deepening. I knew the neighbors were restless. What do you suggest? Samuel looked to Clara, who sat quietly, absorbing the weight of the news. You'll need allies, he said, and you'll need to be ready for anything. That night, Clara lay awake, thinking about the hard-won peace they'd built. The land was unforgiving, but people could be harsher. Rumors, jealousies, and old grudges could threaten everything. She reached for Elijah's hand in the dark. We'll face it, she whispered. Together. He squeezed her hand back. A silent promise. Days later, tension rippled through Dust Creek. Elijah's neighbors pressed him to sell or compromise. Some meetings turned heated, words sharper than knives. Clara attended one such gathering, standing quietly by Elijah's side. She realized that surviving the frontier meant more than physical strength. It demanded courage, diplomacy, and sometimes sacrifice. Her presence, steady and sincere, and nods of respect, even from the harshest critics. Amid the turmoil, Clara found strength in the routines of the ranch. She and Elijah worked harder than ever, repairing fences, tending animals, and dreaming of the future they would protect. Slowly, they built bridges with neighbors, showing that their partnership was more than a convenience, it was a foundation. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, Elijah and Clara sat watching the sky turn gold and purple. "We've come a long way," Elijah said softly. Clara nodded. "And there's still more to come." Their hands met, fingers intertwined, ready for whatever lay ahead. Spring had come to the Colorado ranch, painting the hills in fresh greens and wildflowers. The air was warm with promise, and the hard winter's grip had finally loosened. Clara and Elijah stood side by side on the porch, watching calves frolic. In the sunlit meadow, their journey from strangers to partners was marked by hardship, hope, and a love neither had expected. The struggles they faced, the storms, the skepticism, the shadows from the past had tested them but never broken their bond. Clara's quiet strength and Elijah's steady heart had built more than a home. They'd built a family. They had learned to trust each other, to find joy in the small moments, the shared meal, the evening star, the soft brush of a hand. One afternoon, Clara knelt in the garden, planting seeds that promised to bloom in the months ahead. Elijah joined her, brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "You're my world now," he said simply. Clara smiled, warmth filling her chest. "And you're mine." As the sun dipped low, they sat together on the porch swing, the rhythm of the land humming beneath them. They spoke of dreams yet to come, a bigger house, children's laughter, and a life built not on wealth but on love. Clara thought back to the letter she'd written months ago. The hope she'd dared to clutch. She had been rejected for being too poor. But here, with Elijah, she was rich beyond measure. Under the vast, western sky, two souls once lonely found home in each other, and together, they made a world worth living for.